some words to call us into the spirit of worship. Words by Maya Angelou. Carefully the leaves of autumn sprinkle down the tinny sounds of little dyings, and skies sated of ruddy sunsets, of roseate dawns, roil ceaselessly in the cobweb grays and turn to black for comfort. Only lovers see the fall, a signal end to endings, a gruffish gesture alerting those who will not be alarmed that we begin to stop in order simply to begin again. We stop here on Sunday that we may begin a week with the freshness of eyes renewed by rest and souls renewed by hope. Let us worship together.
You are the new day. You are the new day.
It is our custom to share words of wisdom from others, and they are found in your responsive reading. Words from our President John F. Kennedy from 1962 in a commencement address he delivered at Yale University. As every past generation has had to disenthrall itself from the inheritance of truisms and stereotypes, so in our own time we must move on from the reassuring repetition of stale phrases to a new, difficult, but essential confrontation with reality. The great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Too often we hold fast with the cliches of our forebears. We subject all facts to a prefabricated set of interpretations.
We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought.
I love that last phrase. Do you not share it? We all enjoy the comfort of our opinions, which of course are right, without the discomfort of having to think about them too much. But this is Fountain Street Church, where my task is to crack the whip of discomfort over your complacent brows, which doesn't make for popularity, but makes for good spirituality. This place has been annoying the population of Greater Grand Rapids for almost 150 years, and if you're here, being annoyed is part of the fun. But it is also part of the joy to have the music, this house, and the company around you. For we are all fellow pilgrims on the journey of truth. And if you're here for a day or a lifetime, you are fellow pilgrims with us today. Fountain Street Church has been trying to free minds and grow souls and change the world for almost a century and a half. If we do it right, we'll have to continue doing it for another century and a half. And if you'd like to come with us, please do. One way or the other, we are about the work of comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. And the good news is we're all, at least sometimes, both. So if you are in need of comfort, I am here as your pastor. If you're in need of affliction, I'm here to tell you as your preacher. Welcome to Fountain Street Church, a center of comforting and afflicting religion for 150 years. Almost all religious communities have writings they revere, sometimes as the actual utterances of a transcendent God, sometimes as the record of others who were seeking that God or none at all. Whether it's the Pali Canon of Buddhism, whether it's the assortment of Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas that are in the Hindu community, whether it's the scriptures that are called the Torah or the Gospel or the Quran. These writings influence millions, no, billions of people on a day-to-day basis. We are a bit skeptical of these claims. However, not to know them is not to know the world that we are in. And so I share with you, of them in ways that, shall we say, may not be conventional, but nonetheless potentially insightful. This year I am walking my way through the book of Psalms, a book of poems that are remarkably personal, even though they're used often in liturgical settings like this. And I'm stopping this morning at Psalm number 5. You can tell I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, but I will interrupt them from time to time with more familiar ones. Psalm number 5, I didn't read it until I set my course to look at it. And in the midst of it, it's rather long, so I won't give you every word. David, supposedly, is saying, "Give ear to my speech, God. Consider my utterance. Heed the sound of my cry, my King and God. I pray to you." I interrupt here to say the word pray is actually the word please, not as in to please, but as in please might I get. It's an imprecation. It's a supplication. Hear my voice, he says, at daybreak. I plead before you and wait, for you are not a God who desires wickedness. Evil cannot abide with you. Wanton men cannot endure in your sight. You detest all evildoers. Here's the part that got under my skin, the next few verses. You doom those who speak lies. Murderous, deceitful men God abhors. But I, through your abundant love, enter your house. I bow down in awe at your holy temple. Lead me along your righteous path because of my watching foes. Make your way straight before me, for there is no sincerity on their lips. Their heart is malice. Their throat is an open grave. Their tongue is slippery. Don't you love those images? I'll come back to those in my sermon. George Eliot, in her book Adam Bede, made this curious observation. Falsehood is so easy, truth so difficult. Examine your words well, and you will find out that even when you have no motive to be false, it is a very hard thing to say the exact truth. Thoughts on truth and falsehood, on lying and veracity in this hour of worship today. I'm pondering our prayerful moment. It is so central to other religious traditions, and sometimes the words are actually prescribed, and that has great power. I worship in the Jewish community from time to time, and I get used to hearing those prayers, and they take on gravitas and meaning with repetition. You feel that you're saying words that people 1,000 years ago said, and it links you in certain powerful ways that other prayer does not. And then on the other hand, there are the prayers that come spontaneously, like when you have to throw on the brakes and you just barely miss hitting the car in front of you. There's a prayer, isn't there? Or others in our lives. And what they all come down to is this reaching out. I know prayer should be inward. I know in scriptures it says go into your closet and make sure no one's watching you, because you don't want to make a display of praying. You don't want people to say, wow, look at that guy, he prays up a storm. The whole point is to be authentically yourself. And yet when we pray, whatever that means to you, because we have a range of opinion here from complete nonsense to I am firmly sure that there's someone paying attention. It is an effort to connect. And I guess the way I'd like to put this is if you are disconnected from yourself, your words will be inauthentic. But if you're disconnected from the rest, your words will have no value. So in a sense, you're trying to make a connection between your inmost self and your outmost world. I don't know if words can do that. I'm not sure they can, but I do think that when we do this thing, it is more likely that when we need to feel that connection, we can make it happen. This is practice. It's like doing your scales on a piano. We learn here how to be fluent there. So let's practice together. To whom it may concern, that's as good as we can pray. To something that might be listening and might be caring, to myself who ought to be listening and ought to be caring. Am I awake enough to be present to this moment? Am I present enough to be awake in this moment? Am I here? Are you here? Are we here at all? And yet indisputably there is something here, and we are in search of what it is and what it means. We pause, allow spaces between words. We allow the words to lose their meaning, to be mere sounds. Because sometimes our utmost expression is a groan, or a shout, or a sob. Is anyone listening? Does anything care? We cannot know. But unless we groan or sob or shout or speak or sing, nothing will know to answer. So in this moment we bring those shouts and sobs, those groans and laughs, those words we fill with meaning, and hope that someone, something, somehow hears them. And it turns out that it matters. Does it matter? We can only ask. And so that is our prayer, to ask. Pray, pray, pray. Pray, pray again. And listen. 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 Upon these things and all the other things we carry in our hearts, we devote these moments of silence to that truest prayer. And so may it be, and amen. I understand the urge to applaud. It is a form of appreciation. It is a prayer in its own way. However, when they make that noise up there, the most delicious part of it is allowing the note to die away until you can't remember whether you're hearing it or remembering it. So that's a spiritual discipline I urge upon you. When they do that, just let it fade away. There's a wonderful Estonian composer, I think he's Estonian, Arvo Pärt. Maybe you know his work. And he writes classical music that evokes this sound. He calls it tintinnabulation. I think it's worth letting it just ring in your head. Oh well, let's get on to other things. I need always to remember that those who preceded me are those who give me the authority and the place to stand here. Not just you, but our ancestors. We lift up, or I lift up each week, the names of those whose lives were ended at this time in this year or other years. We like to celebrate birthdays, but we should honor death days as well. They are not losses. They are transitions to memory. And their value become even more precious in their absence. I lift up the name, sadly, this past week of someone very newly passed, Drusilla Hillman Richard, dear to many of us and precious to those in this room. And also the name of Roy Malarick and Claire Jaretsky. These and others whose lives were ended at this time in years past or this own year. Bless us with their presence in this house and with the memories that they convey upon us. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' height, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekinah to the ranks of our beloved who went to their eternal place of rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally. Bind your soul to theirs and to we who are the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace, and let us say, Amen. Like all the hardest sermons, this one did not begin at the screen, it began in the kitchen. That is to say, only when I'm not thinking about it does it become visible in my peripheral mental view. So when I can't imagine or find the words to begin a sermon, I'll go and wash the dishes. Seems that's a time when the genie of inspiration lurks there beside the steel wool and the... But this week was harder, so I had to go on and do the laundry and make the bed, and still nothing. And then I was pondering and worrying and fretting about this all day Friday, and then I went to the opera, and that's when it turned up. In fact, in the intermission, I made quick notes. We'll see if it worked. You'll see how it turns out. There is no sincerity on their lips, says the psalm. Their heart is filled with malice. Their throat is an open grave. Their tongue is slippery. That's the stuff that spoke to me in this Psalm number 5. Honestly, many of the Psalms are very similar one to another, praising God or hectoring enemies or feeling persecuted. I mean, the themes just repeat over and over again, kind of like things in church after all. In fact, if you do your research, 2 Psalms are almost identical one to another. They vary only slightly. Whoever was putting together the collection didn't do a solid editing job, obviously. So what gets my attention as I study these documents, these poems, are the metaphors buried inside them, the one catch of a phrase more than the scope of a whole psalm. One need not be religious to find, for example, the phrase, the valley of the shadow of death, to be evocative and telling. In fact, the Hebrew word for it, tzalmavet, is even more impressive because it combines the 2 words for shadow and death into one, tzalmavet. And you can get a sense of their intimacy in a way that the shadow of death does not. But that's another psalm, and we'll talk about that another Sunday. This morning, it is in fact Psalm 5, and the phrase that stuck with me, their throat is an open grave, their tongue slippery. I was looking for a way to unfold that, to pierce it, to get inside of it, because the very definition of lying is to bury the truth. The very method of lying is to slip something by someone so they don't even know that they've been deceived. So when you think about it, It's a really wonderful metaphor for lying altogether. Lying is as old as the hills. We all know that. But at least as old as the Bible, because it's obviously talking about it. One of the great 10 Commandments is, thou shalt not bear false witness, lie. Lying is wrong. Lying is bad. Everybody knows that. What could I possibly preach about it that you don't already know? So I thought and could come up with nothing except don't do that. Until on Friday night I was sitting at the opera, Rigoletto, and there's the Duke of Mantua seducing young Gilda. Rigoletto is a typical tragic opera redeemed by much delicious music, and it all hinges on a lie. The libertine Duke of Mantua, who seduces every woman he can get his hands on, and there are many, seduces the innocent daughter of the jester Rigoletto, Gilda, with smooth, slippery words. There he is, singing to her, and I'm not going to sing for you because then it wouldn't be delicious music. But the words are, now that both of us burn with a single fire, the God of love has bound our destinies together inseparably. Love is the sunshine of the soul, 'tis life itself, its voice is the beating of our hearts. Be still mine. He goes on like that for lines and lines, singing in this phenomenally beautiful tenor. Who would not fall in love, or at least be tempted by that? To seduce. What a wonderful word. It means to lead away, to lead astray. It comes from the same word as sedition, to betray. In this case, the Duke is doing a double deception. Not only does he not love Gilda, he's pretending not to be the Duke, but a poor student who's been watching her from afar, whom she has seen looking longingly at him from a distance. He's been stalking her, setting this up for weeks. And when he overhears her talking to her nursemaid that she is in love with that student over there in the church, he springs his trap. He sings those beautiful words. She melts, they kiss, death is inevitable. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Some of you know that. I looked it up. It's from a poem by Tennyson called Marmion. It was a great hit when it came out, and now hardly a soul knows it, but it has that couplet in it. But even as a boy, I heard my mother recite it. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. And I could understand it right away. Its logic is undeniable. But mind you, I said I was a boy. I must have been lying. Yes. We start lying very early in life, don't we? Long before we can even begin to calculate the cost-benefit analysis. How many parents have looked at their toddler and said, "Did you eat that cookie?" And they shake their head solemnly no while the crumbs cling to their lips. How do they know to lie? Isn't that interesting? And we humans, we're not the only ones to do it. Franz de Waal, a primatologist in the 1980s, studied chimpanzees in the Arnhem Zoo in the Netherlands and discovered, chimpanzees being social, that they were constantly deceiving each other. They don't speak lies, not speaking, but they were constantly deceiving one or another to gain power or advantage. It seems that we are not alone in our duplicitous ways. Other animals, it turns out, do it as well. In fact, biologically, lots of species pull off deceptions. Mostly they do it through their behavior or their coloring and instinctively, but a few species, chimpanzees, bonobos, apes, and humans, do so on purpose. Lying, it turns out, from an anthropological point of view, is almost built into social species. It's a function that must be important. It's a little bit like gossip. We know it's wrong, but somehow it continues. So it must be doing something that the society itself either needs or uses. Now, that's all very academic, and I won't point you to the many papers I read this week in order for you to know that I am a very great scholar. The point is, we learn to lie It isn't innate, and we learn to lie because we live in groups. We watch someone lie, we watch someone get away with it, and we think, Of course, they don't always get away, but often enough that it becomes a tactic worth considering. How many of us give in and buy a lottery ticket? We know the odds are against it, but you might win. And it's a cinch if you don't buy, you won't win. And that's the logic of any child eventually. Well, I don't know if I can get away with it, but I know if I don't lie, I won't get away with it. So at least my odds of getting away with it go up if I lie. We've all done that math. We all do it every day. That's why George Eliot is right. Falsehood is easy. Truth is difficult, because saying the exact truth can be costly. So I want to make my point here that in the end, lying seems to be built into the human species, that we do it for a variety of reasons. We learn it from others. We even come to appreciate it when it's done really well. The Artful Dodger in Oliver Twist is a phenomenally good liar. Not only is he a pickpocket, but when he's finally picked up and accused in court of being a thief, which, by the way, is true, he commits the greatest lie of all. He says, I am a victim of society. In other words, it's not my fault. And then he roars to the judge, I am an Englishman. Where are my privileges? He commits the big lie of not claiming to be innocent, but to claim others are treating him badly. You have to appreciate the boldness, if nothing else. Less excitedly, as one who walks through town often, going from here to home and down to the YMCA, I am often approached by poor people who want to tell me a tale of woe about how they need money to buy this or get that. Sometimes I've heard the same story several times from the same person who forgot that he told me that last week. And when I do yield, it's often because I appreciate the performance more than the actual fact. The Duke is a dog, but he sings beautifully. Who wouldn't fall for a good song or a good story? So we lie for lots of reasons. We give in to lies for lots of reasons, but I think there's one I want to explore for a moment, and that is that we lie to evade. In some ways, this is the most forgivable of lies. The 3-year-old with the cookie crumbs simply wants not to be punished. We can get behind that really rapidly. In fact, some moral philosophers will tell you that some lies are acceptable if they prevent a subsequent evil that could be prevented by a lie. For example, there were those who sheltered Jews during the Holocaust. When they were asked by the authorities if they knew where family X was or people Y were, they faced a dilemma. Shall I tell the truth, that they're in my attic, or shall I tell a lie and save their lives? And many, not enough, lied. This would be considered a noble lie because the cost of the truth would be almost unbearable. If it is not always wrong, then the purpose of the lie does become consequential. Those that prevent a greater wrong, obviously, are at least forgivable, if not laudatory. Those that seek to do harm, those are the ones we should condemn. There's no controversy here. I'm just making sure we're on the same page. But do we really know? Do we really know when we are protecting the innocent, including ourselves, or simply evading responsibility? That's the tangled moral web. That's the one we spin in our own minds, because even when we do something wrong, we've already forgiven ourselves for doing it, haven't we? So let's be honest. Most of the time when we lie, the person we're protecting is myself. E.M. Forster observed that the armor of falsehood is subtly wrought out of darkness and hides a man not only from others but from his own soul. That's the point I want to make today. Greater than the deception of others is the deception of self that lying ultimately demands. From the childhood excuse of, well, he started it, to the accusation of fake news, we go from knowing something is false to believing that the falsehood is actually true. Because we have to believe our lies, because if we don't, we will be found out. Once we hide the truth from others, we have to defend it again and again and again. Oh, that tangled web. And eventually, if you say it often enough, you actually come to believe the falsehood was true. And in fact, the most convincing liars are those who believe their own lies. Falsehood thus becomes part of the identity of the person who told it. Their identity becomes entangled, in fact, based on and inextricable from the falsehood they told others and now to themselves. They become false people. So we've gone from the moral, it's wrong, to the psychological, I can get away with it, and now we go to the spiritual quality of lying. Consider this insight from St. Vincent de Paul. Humility is nothing but truth, and pride is nothing but lying. Humility is nothing but truth about yourself, and pride is nothing but lying about yourself. As I pondered this, I thought of the time when I lived in Austin, Texas, and I worked out gamely at a gym near my office, near my church, but it was a bodybuilding gym. So I was surrounded by big, burly, bulgy guys, and it took me a while to figure out that they weren't just bulgy because they ate a lot of chicken and lifted a lot of weight. Some of them were using steroids. They really do make your muscles bigger, by the way. They work like a lie. But like a lie, once told, the moment you stop, those muscles begin to shrink again. In order for them to sustain their size and their bulginess, they had to continue to take the drugs. Similarly, with lying, you have to continue lying, and you have to do it, and it has to become part of you. Yeah, you feel great. You even look great. People look at muscular men and go, wow. And so you not only get the benefit of the drug, you get the benefit of being appreciated for taking it without people knowing you took it. But you have to keep lying. You have to keep taking the drug, or you'll just become the person you were, which apparently you're unwilling to do because it would mean shrinking, getting smaller, becoming weak. For them, the truth is the open grave, and the falsehood is the path. This, I believe, is the corruption of deceit. And I believe it is also the corruption of which Lord Acton famously speaks when he says all power tends to corrupt. It's not the abuse of power, it's the abuse of truth and falsehood that corrupts. Those with power, insert name here, come to the conclusion that they are entitled to it. They deserve it. That's the steroid of self-deception. They're already lying. I ought to be, insert important role here. General, president, important, a billionaire. Told long enough, it becomes part of their identity. That's who I am. L'état c'est moi, said Louis XIV. It becomes as certain as dogma and as impossible to prove. And those who present evidence of its falsehood must themselves be the liars, because after all, I'm in possession of the truth of my own excellence. If you criticize me, you must be telling a lie, because I would not lie to myself, because I've lied to myself for so long it has now become the truth that I know, believe, and think to be true. No, you're the liar. When you criticize me, you're wrong, and you're making it up because you're telling me I'm wrong, and I cannot be wrong because I am important. That is the corruption of power, right there. It is not the abuse of you, but the abuse of self. And of course, not just individuals. Whole societies can fall prey to this grandiose sense of who they are, from ancient Rome to Nazi Germany and many more. Let's go back to President Kennedy. The great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest. Too often we hold fast to the cliches of our forebears. We subject all facts to a prefabricated set of interpretations. We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. That is the danger of deception. If there is an example in our national history, it is John Paul Van's book from '88, A Bright Shining Lie. Are you familiar with it? 1988, History of Vietnam. Now, tell me why it took 30 years to turn that into a television series that we would actually pay attention to. Vietnam is the greatest lie we have told ourselves in our lifetimes. And its falsehood still afflicts us and weighs upon us. It has created the culture we live in now, with its political polarity, with its divisiveness, with its culture wars. It was Vietnam, it was the 1960s, and wherever you stood there, that's probably where you stand now. And both of us, all of us, are still in the grip of that bright, shining lie. So the question I leave with is, does pride make us lie, or does lying make us proud? Well, I can't say. But as a child, as an adult, I lied, I still lie, because I feel ashamed. I lie because I am afraid. And I think we all do. It is the sense of shame and fear. We as individuals, perhaps even as a nation, that makes us lie to ourselves and to others about who we are. Behind the pride is a fear of shame, of being dishonored, of being belittled. Behind the longing for power is the fear of becoming weak. And yet lying is what is truly shameful. The lie is the greater loss. And deceit is always an act of cowardice and therefore an act of weakness. How ironic is it that the very act of protecting ourselves from shame and weakness require an act that confirm those very things? Oh, what a tangled web we weave. In the story of the emperor's new clothes, which most of you know, which is also a fable of deceit and power, who recognizes that the emperor is naked? Not the emperor, not the tailors, not the courtiers, a child. Not because the child is innocent. No, because the child is powerless. Everyone else had a stake in the lie. So when we listen to the news, when we listen to the voices out there, we should be asking, what are the powerless saying? Because they are more likely to be telling the truth than anyone else. They have nothing to protect. They have nothing to lose. Their dignity has already been robbed. Their station has already been suppressed. Listen to the powerless. They are telling the truth. And they're going to tell a truth that you and I will not want to hear. But is not truth still a more powerful reality than falsehood? Would we not rather be people and a nation anchored in reality than in a dream? In our world today, the truth is more likely to come from the powerless than the powerful. As it says in Psalm 6 next week, by the way, out of the mouths of babes thou hast founded strength, because they speak truth. The question is, will we have the courage to listen? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my redeemer. May we all be chastened by such words. And on that solemn note, it is important to lift our hearts with a certain degree of joy, because we should always greet truth with rejoicing. For I was once lost, and now am found. And so we find ourselves singing with heart and mind verses that will help us, verses 1 and 2, to close our hour of worship. It is number 300 in your hymn book. be upon us. And the power of love direct us and sustain us. And may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in until we meet again indeed from this time forth. From day unto day, for every day is a day which the Lord has made. Let us ever rejoice and be glad in it. Amen and amen.